Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to The Unspoken Truth. I'm your host, Rob Russ, and I'm joined by my good mate, Ed Anderson. How you doing, Ed?
Living the dream, Robbie. How you doing, buddy?
Yeah, really well. Lots going on this side of the world. Lots of work happening on my side. Lots of new things going on in business and plenty going on in the news overnight. Luckily, we're still here. We haven't all been eviscerated in a thermonuclear war just yet. But there's still one more day to go. So they're saying that this is all scheduled for the 5th of July. It's the 6th of July here. It's the 5th of July still over in Europe. So we've still got a couple of hours left in the day before the nuclear disaster happens. I've got an update on that for you today, ladies and gentlemen. The boss of the IAEA has come out and given a statement. So I'll share that statement with you as well. We've got lots happening on the show today. We're going to talk about the Ministry of Truth and why that should just be completely dismissed and destroyed. We're going to talk about some more chaos in France, some really bad stuff going on there. I've got a quick video I want to share with you about that. And also I've got a couple of questions from my American co-host about Trump-style politics. So the Minister for Indigenous Affairs here in Australia keeps wielding out those words, Trump-style politics, and I'm scratching my head going, what on earth does that actually mean? Anyway, we're going to talk about that a little bit because it's kind of funny, and I think it's funny how inept and useless this government minister is, despite the fact that she's been in government literally her entire working life. It's unbelievable how incompetent these people actually are, and they're the people that are in charge and making policy that governs the entire nation. It's just ridiculous. And it highlights to me again that the unspoken truth is that they're not the ones that are really in charge. And I'm going to close out the show today with the alternative view of the world in China. I'm going to show you a video from China, which will make you think, well, maybe everything that they say in the media is not so true. And maybe it's not such a bad place after all. It's actually pretty cool. You'll like this video.
China
as well, yeah. I'm going to start waving a CCP flag, man.
Yeah.
I'm going to become an Australian-Chinese turncoat. Something like that. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, if this is your first time here, welcome. It's great to have you here. We're available as a podcast, so make sure you pop on over to Spotify and Apple Podcasts and get a bit of unspoken truth in your ears. And you can find us wherever you can find all good podcasting and audio content. We're in the top 100 of podcasts in the UK. Can you believe it? That's kind of cool. Thank you for our thank you to the British listeners getting it in our ears. It's kind of cool, right?
Wow.
Yeah, no, I'm impressed as well. I think it's something to do with the algorithm and the consistency that we have going on, but it seems to be encroaching into the charts. I saw us in the top 100 in South Africa as well, of all places. And when I was looking at the analytics on YouTube just the other day, I noticed that we had about like 12% of our audience was from Russia. So I was wondering,
excellent.
What Russians are watching us? Must be the FSB or the whatever they called us, some shit like that, whatever.
You know what? I'll take it. You know, FSB, CIA. Come on, guys. We need some followers. So we'll take everyone.
I didn't see any Chinese CCP flags in there, though. No one from China's watching. We can't seem to penetrate the Great Firewall of China because YouTube's not available there.
They all use VPNs, so I'm sure they're watching.
Yeah, there's some people that are watching there as well. Folks, don't forget to come on over and follow us on Telegram as well. Just scroll down into the description. That's our alternate resource. And we've got alternate resource over on Rumble as well. So if something ever happens to us here on YouTube for some reason, we're going to be available on Twitter, Rumble, Telegram, and we can't be censored on those platforms, so we're all good to go. Ed, have you got any opening remarks before we kick it off today?
Yeah, well, as of yesterday, I am on Twitter, everyone. So if you want to check me out on Twitter, it's at HeyEdOfficial. There you go.
There it is. I got the graphic from yesterday still.
And let's build up my following real fast. You know, I've never done Twitter ever in my life, and I've never used it as a consumer or as I never used it. So
and so now that you're over there and you've been scrolling through the feed mindlessly there, is there something that did you see it and go, oh yeah, that's pretty cool, or did you shrug your shoulders and go, so what's the fuss all about? What are your thoughts?
So what's all the fuss about? Well, listen, I haven't taken the time to really study how to use it yet, so I am kind of been busy with other things. So one of these days I'll probably sit down and do a YouTube video, instructional video about how to, how to use Twitter. So I'll get there. But
well, the good thing about Twitter is it will serve you up things. The algorithm will serve you up things that it thinks that you like, and it's actually pretty on point. it'll keep showing you the same sorts of stuff. So the idea is that you go in there and you actually go and follow the things that you like, and make sure you kind of like engage with it a little bit, just like it or retweet it or something like that, and just share it. And then it'll start to serve you more of the things that you're interested in, like that as well. I always find it really a fun experience to look at somebody else's social media. Often my missus will be sitting on the couch next to me with her iPad and she'll be looking at YouTube. And when she's not watching a video and she comes back to the YouTube home screen, I'm like, hey, show me that for a sec. And I kind of like have a look, and it's like all fashion and photography and, home renovations and all of these things that she really likes. And and then when I show her my like YouTube home screen, it's like war, nuclear video games, first person shooters, news, carnage.
Yeah. You are such a Rob.
That's one of the Robisms, right?
That's right.
There it is. All right, why don't we kick off the show with the Ministry of Truth? Why don't you tell us about what you've got for us today, Ed?
Okay, well, it's fairly straightforward. We've talked quite a bit about this particular topic, but there is recent development, and every once in a while, you do need to revisit the topic because we want to keep people informed. So I'll do a little quick presentation. So let's watch that, and then it's only about 3 minutes long. So. Okay, so as of yesterday, I am on Twitter for the first time in my life. You can find me at HeyEdOfficial. Please go to Twitter, search for HeyEdOfficial, and start following me. Let's grow this community of freedom seekers. Okay, so let's get into it. Okay, so as you know, I spend an awful lot of time reporting to you on all of these daily assaults that we are getting on our fundamental rights, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and privacy, that kind of thing. But I do believe that America and society globally as a whole are center-right people, but they're not the ones making all the noise. They're not the ones making all the attacks on our personal freedoms. And it can get kind of discouraging, but every once in a while, you see a little glimmer of hope. You see a little bit of pushback, a little bit of sanity and reason. And every time we get those little glimmers of hope, they deserve to be highlighted to give you encouragement that there are some sane, rational people out there who actually believe in our freedoms. So today, there was an article out of Zero Hedge that I want to talk to you about. And it really is something to cheer about. But it also highlights the evil that we're up against. Let's take a look at the article. Orwellian Minister of Truth busted. Judge bars Biden officials, agencies from contacting social media companies. Now, this was actually issued yesterday on July 4th, the 4th of July. So somebody was actually working in the government, which is very cool. In an order fittingly issued on Independence Day, a federal judge in Louisiana has forbidden multiple federal agencies and named officials from having any contact with social media companies with the intent to moderate content. The preliminary injunction arises from a suit filed by the states of Missouri and Louisiana, along with individuals that included two leading critics of the worldwide flu lockdown regime. If the allegations made by plaintiffs are true, the present case arguably involves the most massive attack against free speech in United States history, wrote U.S. District Judge Terry A. Doughty. The plaintiffs are likely to succeed on the merits in establishing that the government has used its power to silence the opposition. While the case is dominated by worldwide flu censorship, it also encompasses the Justice Department's efforts to suppress reporting about Hunter Biden's laptop from hell in the run-up to the 2020 election. Doughty gave credence to that accusation. And here's another quote from Judge Doughty. The evidence thus far depicts an almost dystopian scenario. During the worldwide flu pandemic, a period perhaps best characterized by widespread doubt and uncertainty, the United States government seems to have assumed a role similar to an Orwellian Ministry of Truth. The White House defendants made it very clear to social media companies what they wanted suppressed and what they wanted amplified. And faced with unrelenting pressure from the most powerful office in the world, social media companies apparently complied. Okay, so it is very disturbing that any of this actually took place. But in his opinion, Doughty also gave some specific quotes of high government officials in the White House to the social media companies. Listen to these. Okay, so remember, these are all quotes coming from the White House to social media companies. Cannot stress the degree to which this needs to be resolved immediately. please remove this account immediately. And this is a quote to Facebook. Are you guys effing serious? I want an answer on what happened here, and I want it today. And here's another one. This is a concern that is shared at the highest, and I mean highest, levels of the White House. And then this quote. Hey folks, wanted to flag the below tweet and wondering if I can get moving on the process of having it removed ASAP. Okay, so this is a preliminary injunction, right? So it's not final or anything, but I think it's going to be final. At the very least, it brought into the light the things that the actual White House at the highest levels were doing to suppress our free speech and access to potentially life-saving information. These people in our government either do not know what freedom of speech is, or they just don't care. They have an agenda they want to pursue, and they're going to get away with as much as they can until they get some pushback. So let's push back. Listen, we live in a world right now where our government is in the process of issuing digital money and digital IDs and digital passports and surveillance cameras. And unless we stop them, our lives are going to be changed forever. Because once those things are put in place, they're going to be almost impossible to reverse. So remember, reduce your exposure to your bank, buy some gold and silver, and establish streams of passive recurring income. If you don't mind, could you give my video a like and share this video? Let's get the message out.
All right. Nice work, man.
Thank you, Ravi.
Looks like they're doing the same thing.
You're shocked, right? You're shocked.
Well, I'm shocked it's taken so long for the US to catch up to Australia. It looks like you're doing the same thing there as what was happening here in Australia, and finally getting to the bottom of how the censorship regime was working during that Orwellian time. Have you read the book 1984 by George Orwell?
Well, sure.
Oh, man, that's like...
And Animal Farm.
I remember hearing about this book years and years ago, and I remember reading somewhere that it should be on every teenager's reading list.
Yeah.
And I was like, I never heard of that book. What is that? And I went and bought it, and I read it, and I think I read maybe 30 or 40 pages of it, and I was like, oh my God, this is the most like depressing Soviet grey thing that I've ever read. It's like, it's really quite painful on the front end to actually read. It's like, what is this? Where is this going? Because I didn't know what it was, right? I didn't know what, the idea behind it or anything like that. And then I'm sort of just thinking, oh my God, where is this going? But I labored through it. And I don't think a lot of people, you always talk about the school system indoctrinating people, and it's just a giant propaganda machine to make you a factory worker. Well, that is the case. I was watching a Jordan Peterson interview just a couple of days ago, and he was interviewing somebody from an alternative school system. And what they had done is they'd gone away and figured out a way to keep young kids engaged. And it's not about reading, writing, and arithmetic. That is the fundamental foundation pieces of it. But it's about how to keep them engaged in their learning and give them something to aim for and to give them some responsibilities. And it's really quite innovative if you're into that type of thing, if you're into education and how alternative things work. I find all sorts of things interesting in my world. But one of the things that he did there is he talked about the history of education and how it was built on the Prussian, like not Russian, Russian system back in the 17 and 1800s, where what they needed is more soldiers. And so they designed the school system to be very militarized, where people would come into a classroom, they'd sit at desks, and the teacher at the front of the class would spew the information. They'd be required to remember the information. They'd be examined on that, and they'd be told what to do. And then there would be a bell that rang, that let them go out for a break, and a bell that rang that told them that they had to come back and sit at their desk again. And fundamentally, he kind of, there's some stark differences today that we have in our school system, but fundamentally it's based on that. And the Prussians came up with that system because it was all about making people obedient. Because the problem that they had was they couldn't get enough people into the army to go and fight the wars that they needed to fight. Nobody wanted to go and do that. So what they figured was, if we can get young people into this system and we indoctrinate them into a militarized system, making the leap from where they currently are into the military is not such a big thing. And if we can make the military something that was like exciting for young people to go and do, they'll want to go and do that. They'll want to give themselves to the cause like that. And it's actually pretty clever when you think about it. But the problem is it exists in today's system. And the people in our education system today have not read the book 1984. They haven't looked back at the history of education. They haven't done those things. And that's where these policies come from. That's how these people end up where they are.
Well, even if they had read the book 1984, they also read, the Communist Manifesto. Listen.
Well, they read the Communist Manifesto without reading 1984, because if you read the manifesto and then you got to 1984, you'd go, oh, that's the natural extension of it. That's where it ends up.
Okay, so we talk a lot about how the government officials and of that ilk, that class, that they're incompetent, and that is actually a point of debate, because I look at the southern border, for example, and I see it as a complete disgrace, whereas the people who have the agenda, they see it as a huge victory. So whereas I look at the school system, at the product of our education system, as an absolute disgrace, the people in the school system, people who are running the school system, they see it as a huge success. And I guess when we talk about indoctrination and propaganda, I guess it's a matter of perspective, right? Because now I remember as a child, I'd go to grammar school. We started the day by saying the Pledge of Allegiance, right? So that was a form of like promoting. That was like on the tail end of a patriotic society, right? By the time I got to high school, it had already changed pretty dramatically. So the leftists got in there, and the leftists are control. So everything, propaganda isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? When you have children, and you want to teach them certain values and a certain way of life, you are gonna, like if you want your children to be proud of their country, you're gonna have that American flag in your front yard, and you're gonna have them say the Pledge of Allegiance. You're gonna have them read the Declaration of Independence, and you're gonna have them revere our founding fathers, right? So that is a form of propaganda and indoctrination, right? So I guess we all, by necessity, have to be indoctrinated in one sense or another. Otherwise, you grow up with no guidance at all. You're in the wilderness. You're an animal. So the question is the indoctrination, is the subject matter you're being indoctrinated into, is it good or is it evil? Is it good or bad? Right? So so I guess that also comes down to an ideological debate and divide. Right? So I'm
not sure, because what we're missing is a measure of success. And the measure of success, I believe, should be whether or not what it is that you're indoctrinating somebody with, no matter how old they are, whether they're old or they're young, doesn't matter. Whatever you're putting out there and putting forward, is that adding value to society and making society better?
Again, that's
perspective.
It depends on your perspective, right?
So let me boil it down to its fundamentals then. The fundamentals would be, does it create jobs and create prosperity for the society as a whole? And if it does, that can only be a good thing, because...
No, not necessarily.
No, you don't think?
No. It depends on what your idea of a good society is.
Yeah.
If your idea of a good society is promoting, transgenderism among, teenage girls, okay? If that's your idea of a good society, that's not my idea of a good society.
But what I'm saying is maybe a large part of the reason that those sorts of ideas are rejected pretty heavily by the large majority of people, and they're not rejected so much, they're allowed, because we want inclusion, so we allow them, but then they keep forcing it on us. And it's like, okay, cool, you can, and most people will say, you can sleep with whoever you want, you can be whoever you want. I don't care about your I just don't care, man. I got shit to do. It doesn't affect me. I don't care. If you want to do that, then do that. But they keep ramming it down your throat. And what I'm saying is that none of what they're ramming down my throat makes society any better, because we're already saying it's okay. We don't care. But it's fine. We don't care about it. It's not creating jobs. It's not creating prosperity. It's not creating something that would add value to advance a society and to push it forward. And that's the thing that we're missing, is the critical measure of success. But to your point, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. That's what it comes down to when you boil it down, no?
Yeah, I mean, you and I, we have shared views on what is success and what makes a good society. But there is a large contingent in both of our societies, in Western culture, who have a really bizarre way of looking at the world. And I think it's a deviant way of looking at the world. If you think that it's okay for an older man to be attracted to a minor, and so you want to take away the stigma of that P word that we call them, and call them minor attracted people. And so you're trying to make it socially acceptable for that
normalizing
kind of behavior.
it.
Okay, so shame does play a role in society, and it's okay to hold some people, some behavior in contempt. The problem is we have a segment of our society who believe that whatever feels good to you is okay. There is no right or wrong. We're not going to make a moral judgment, but we are going to make moral judgment on people who judge you. Okay, so these people who promote tolerance and they preach tolerance, they tend to be the most intolerant people you will ever come across. But these people are in charge of the school system, and we've seen parents being attacked at school board meetings when parents push back on the things that are being promoted in the schools, and they're labeled as domestic terrorists for voicing their concerns. So the idea of this Prussian program, where it was an indoctrination system leading, they wanted good soldiers, they wanted to produce good soldiers. You know what? Part of me is good on them, in a way, right? Because some of the best schools in America are military schools, right? And it's kind of prestigious to get into them, and because if you graduate from a good military school, you're taught discipline, and you're taught mathematics, engineering, the things that you want to be an officer. You're taught certain values. You're taught how to be self-reliant, how to be competent, how to be a problem solver. So there's a lot of I think there's a lot of advantages to like military schools or any school. Look at the Catholic school system, right? At least when I was growing up, the Catholic school system, they were kind of rigid. You wore uniforms, right? You're expected to wear a uniform, and you had codes of conduct. And if you went outside those codes of conduct, you'd be penalized. On the other hand, you're getting very rigorous education and how to read well, how to write well, how to think well. So there's something to be said for a structured education, some discipline enforced. Versus, a liberal arts high school where everyone's free to wear what, you can be whatever you want, find your truth. Everyone's got their own truth, and you can explore your different, So I'm not really big on people, telling a teenager to go find his own truth. That's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. Let me share a little anecdote of a Catholic school here in Sydney. And I know you're making a generalization, and you have to make generalizations when you're talking about these things, because you're talking about institutions. You're not talking about individuals, organizations or individual schools. So both my sons went to a Catholic school, and I refused to pay the school fees because I didn't want my kids to go to a religious school because, my partner and I were separated. And it's not that I didn't want them to go to a Catholic school. I wanted them to have the choice about religion, and I didn't think it should be pushed upon children at all. Because when religion is forced upon children, my view is that they don't have a choice. It's a little bit like allowing your 12-year-old son to cut his dick off because he says he wants to be a girl. Like you're the adult in charge. You're the one that's supposed to prevent that from happening. But for some reason, the system is now positioning itself where you're not allowed to intervene into any of that. And it's actually a crime for you to intervene into any of that, into the well-being of a 12-year-old. What does a 12-year-old know? So on that scenario, like, what does a 12-year-old know about religion, and what should they be indoctrinated into some religious dogma that I don't personally believe in? Like, why is that? My ex insisted, she paid for it. They went there. It was fine. And over a period of time, I discovered that just one generation prior, so her brother had went to the same school, my ex, that is, and her brother-in-law had also gone to that school. And in that generation, so it's literally, so my son's uncles on both sides, right? So a direct uncle, Annette's brother, and then the brother-in-law, so he's his uncle as well, went to that school. And there was like two what would you call them? They're called brothers. That's what they were called. Two brothers that walked around in a wizard's robe, and look like something out of Harry Potter. And I'd say that in a derogatory sense because they were walking around doing that, molesting boys in that generation. And so I used to make a joke about it with my sons all the time because, you know, I'm just like always taking the piss out of them. They're always mucking around with me as well. You know, I'd ring them up and say, it wasn't until they were probably 15 or 16, right? They're kind of old enough to know better and know that I'm mucking around and not being influenced. But I'd ring up and say, how's school? Everything all right? Good. Did anyone touch you? No. Okay, good. And I made a joke about it, right? I'd make fun of it. And no, that doesn't happen anymore, Dad. And I'm like, what are you talking about, man? If you rewind the clock like just 10 years ago, that was happening at that school where you were. What makes you think that the actual culture is any different? Oh, those people are all gone. That's all gone. That's all gone. And I'm like, okay, cool. No worries. But I'd still make fun of it, right? And they'd get a little bit like antsy. That's not happening, Dad. I'm like, yeah, all right. Okay, cool. It's not happening to you that you know about. And it turns out that the principal of that school was embezzling money from the school. And I can remember going to a school event there and sitting down in the hall and kind of slouching in my chair like this, looking around and going, hey, Cam, why is a guy over there? No offense, man, but why is a guy over there with a turban on his head? Is he a Sikh guy? Yeah. So isn't this a Catholic school? Yeah. Isn't Sikh a different religion to Catholicism? Yeah. So what the fuck is he doing here in this school? And he goes, oh, we include everybody, Dad. And I'm like, you're muted. My head's exploding, right? My head's exploding. And shortly after that conversation with Cab at his little event, I discovered, he told me that this guy, the principal, had been arrested by the police for embezzling, and he embezzled like more than $1.6 million out of the actual school. No wonder he was accepting Sikhs. He was accepting anybody because they were coming in and paying because he was pocketing the money. You know, I know you're generalizing about Catholic schools and them having good structures and all of that. And, you know, as a whole, when I went there and I saw the performances that they had on stage and the young men, they were dressed in their, you know, the uniforms with their ties and they were singing and there was music and there was all sorts of different things. It was 10 out of 10. And it gave me a restored hope in humanity. And just because there was a dickhead administrator in there and he was a criminal doesn't mean that the kids didn't make the most of the scenario that they were in. You know, they had incredible football teams. They had great performing arts programs and all sorts of things. And my kids turned out okay in the end and nobody touched them. So, you know, I think you're quite right when it comes to generalizing about that school system and that structure as well.
Well, look, I've been raised Catholic, but God knows I have my problems with the church. You know.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, big time. I mean, it's been rocked by scandals now for decades, you know, right? They've always had but that doesn't take away from the actual teachings of Christ and the actual teaching of the Catholic religion. So you have to be able to discern between the Church of Men and the Church of Christ, you know, the actual message and the lessons of a moral life. But the scandals aside, look, whether it is a Catholic school or another religious-based school, they tend to be structured, right? They tend to have they tend to have more rules than a secular school, and I think rules are really important for young people who are trying to figure things out. And I take a little different point than I think the one you were making earlier, and that is I brought my boys up as Catholic. You know, they went to church. You know, they had the baptism, they had the communion. Before they didn't know it was all ritual stuff, right? But they didn't really know the difference. But they did it because I made it.
Because mom and dad wanted it.
And I made them excited about it. I made them. It's all about a presentation. But children, the human brain isn't fully formed until you're about 25. So, right?
I think I'm 46, man, and I don't think it's fully formed. I still can't decide what to eat for breakfast.
I mean, part of being a parent is guiding your children in the right way, and of course, everyone has a different idea of what that is, and that's what makes the world beautiful. Is that we have many different ideas of what makes a good person, and then and over the course of time, people can decide for themselves. You know, so my sons, they can decide for themselves whether it's the the faith for them or not on their own, right? So but children, they don't know the difference. So you do have to. I don't believe in this idea. I'm not going to force this on you because someday you might not find. No. That's a cop out. You're taking a lazy approach to parenting when you do that.
Well, the opposite is of like your view of that is the opposite of mine. Like your view is you should expose kids to that stuff so they can see it, and then later on they can decide for themselves. I'm of the opinion that they're not old enough to understand what it is that they're being exposed to. Wait till they're a bit older.
Well, if you wait until they're older, if you wait until they got a fully formed brain at 25,
they just want to drink beer.
Oh yeah,
You missed the boat. That's the whole point.
If you can wait until then to start teaching catechism, the basics of the religion or whatever it is you want.
Yeah, whatever it might be. Yeah.
If you wait until then, they got a lot of catching up to do before
But a lot of people have a religious awakening later in their life because they achieve.
So that's going to be your excuse. But a lot of people wait until. Listen, a lot of people didn't become millionaires until they got into their 60s or 70s. Our message here is to tell people to wait until they're 60 before they start seeking their fortune.
No, you're quite right. And when I look at, I'm happy to be corrected about my parenting or my decision-making process or something like that. But when I look at how Cam and Trav turned out after coming through the Catholic system, everything that I had as a preconceived idea was all for nothing. It was all like actually a pretty stupid idea because when you look at how successful these young men are, they're incredibly successful. They're incredibly well adjusted. They're incredibly smart and they're doing really well in the world. They're not out there drinking or taking drugs or driving around cars at 200 kilometers an hour or being crazy. They're well adjusted young men and they're contributing members of society. And that's a large part to do with their mother. And maybe a little bit to do with me, but mostly to do with the school system because most of the time when they're kids, they're at school. So the system did a really good job. And I guess maybe my philosophical differences about religion, about the dogma of religion and about saying, I don't want them to be in a Catholic school. Why can't they just go to just a public school or another private school? Why do they have to do that? I dug my heels in hard there at the start because I just didn't believe in it. But when I look at the outcome of it, it's unfounded and it's like not really that big a deal. I can remember, just shifting gears here a little bit, Ed, I remember when I first left the Navy and I was out of the Navy for about 6 months because I couldn't do an inner service transfer. They wouldn't do that for me for some reason. But then when I joined the Army, I hadn't seen anybody for a while because I went to recruit school, I went to the infantry school, and then I went straight overseas on operations. And then when I came back, I remember seeing my brother and he had these like snide remarks to me. And I don't think he meant anything by it. But I don't remember exactly what he said to me, but I remember the words to the effect of, how's the brainwashing going? I'm like, and I remember just like laughing it off at the time, but thinking, what does he mean by that? Am I brainwashed? Do I seem like I'm brainwashed to him? And I must have, because he wouldn't have said that and he wouldn't have kind of implied that unless he saw something. And I think he's just mucking around, right? He's just saying it in jest, it's just fooling around. But then as I got a little bit older, I always remember that kind of the influence of that comment and what that was. And I am brainwashed because when I'm on an exercise and like we're assaulting the position and we don't take prisoners and there's a guy on the ground, like my drill is to give him two. Like I see there's one guy down and you double tap the guy on the ground and then you keep moving forward. Then you call out one dead enemy. And I'm like, am I brainwashed? Yeah, I am. Brainwashed or indoctrinated or trained, or maybe those words are interchangeable. They're all there. And so when we look at the Ministry of Truth, let's bring it home with this. They're trying to do the same thing here in Australia. They're trying to introduce legislation that is going to fine social media companies between $3 and $7 million if they're perpetuating false information and false narratives. But no one is saying how that false narrative or that falseness comes about, what's true or what's not. So the Australian government is trying to be the Ministry of Truth and the arbiter of truth. And there's also some scuttlebutt out there. I don't know how true it is. I can't find the documents. I looked for a little while yesterday. But there's some scuttlebutt out there that if you've gone out on Twitter or on Facebook or somewhere, you've created content and it's actually been found to be misinformation, the cops can come and arrest you and detain you while there's an investigation going on, Andrew Tate style. And they're going to shut you down and lock you up while they're investigating what you're saying is true or not true. Like, what? Really? Now we've moved away from 1984 to Animal Farm. Now we've moved to a new level of complete and total and utter chaos in our society where they've stamped out free speech. And I want to bring it home with this this screen share here. And I came across this video in Twitter as I was scrolling.
It's nothing to celebrate.
Turn the sound off there. So this woman, you can see what she's doing. She's attempting to burn the flag. She's attempting to create some sort of chaos here. And I won't press the play button or the sound button because you can't. She's kind of saying there's nothing good about America. There's nothing here, and she's getting people to like chant, but she can't really get any momentum. And I think there's about 2 people in the audience, and this idiot with his lighter can't even burn the flag. And I was looking at that, and I was thinking to myself, what normal person would go into a public place, get a microphone, and scream at the top of their lungs and burn the flag in public like that? I was just scratching my head thinking, is that something that we need? Is that something that we need to talk about today? But then I thought to myself, and I was reminded by you, and you've taught me a lot about free speech because we don't really talk about that very much here in Australia. It's not enshrined in our Bill of Rights. We don't have a Bill of Rights. You have the right to free speech. And no matter how much I don't like that woman saying whatever it is she's saying or attempting to burn a flag and saying, well, it's like, okay, well, if you don't like this place, well, why don't you go somewhere else? Why don't you go to Saudi Arabia or Afghanistan or to Iran? Why don't you just piss off and get out of here? Why are you screaming and shouting and doing that? And then I thought to myself, well, she's allowed to scream and shout. She's allowed to do that. And as ugly as that is, and as awful as that is, I just have to scroll past it and go, well, why is she saying that? And maybe if I put my emotions aside and use my critical thinking a little bit and think, why does she feel so wronged? What? You know, she's got a pocket full of money. She's got a fridge full of food. She's probably got a job. She's got a family that loves her. But she still goes out there and does that and says America's the worst place on planet Earth. And I'm thinking, why would you do that? Like, there's a reason behind that. And as ugly as that speech is, it needs to be allowed. And I saw it, and all of a sudden, I wasn't triggered by it anymore. I was like, okay, we need to let that happen. She's allowed to have a view. I'm allowed to not agree with her view. She's allowed to have her view. And maybe she can sway me by her argument or her conversation. I doubt it, but what if she could? And if she said something that was reasonable, maybe I'd have something to say about that, and I can have that as part of my lexicon and part of my conversation. But the reality is she can't. She's an idiot. And I think it's stupid, and I think it's ridiculous what she's doing because she doesn't realize how lucky she is to live in that country. And I think it's a strange thing that's happening at the Ministry of Truth in America and the Ministry of Truth in Australia, where they won't allow something like that. She would be taken away and locked up and put in jail while an investigation was happening, while she's standing there saying, America's the worst place in the world. It's never given me anything. All it's done is taken away from me, and I'm this and I'm that. Well, is that mis and disinformation? Well, according to the Australian Ministry of Truth, it would be. So if I stood in a park and did the same thing, the police would come and arrest me and put me in a cell and say, you're spreading misinformation. You're spreading lies. That's not true. But it's actually my truth. And it's her truth. Her truth is that. That's why she's up there on that stage and saying those things at the top of her lungs, screaming and shouting, because she believes that that's actually her truth. But the Ministry of Truth in government says, no, that's not your truth. You're not allowed to have that. You're not allowed to do that. You can't be there. Is it a good thing that the US government has said nobody in government is to talk to social media companies anymore? Yeah, absolutely. That's where there needs to be a division between church and state. There needs to be a division between government and social media, government and propaganda. Because how would government get their message out if they couldn't talk to social media? The only thing they could do is talk to mainstream media, but that's becoming less and less relevant as the longer time goes on, the less chances of that surviving are going to be. That's just going to go away completely because news and content has shifted radically to shows like this and thousands of other shows just like this one. People don't give a shit about mainstream media anymore. And if they couldn't communicate in social media, then their ability to communicate their message would be completely stamped out. Is that a good thing? Does that go to the part of the free speech there for you, Ed, where the government should have the ability to say those things and communicate in social media? but they want to be the arbiters of that message. That's the catch.
Yeah, see, that's the thing, though. If you're going to be the arbiter of truth, and you're going to inculcate that into your government, then you better be okay with the idea that the next administration will have their own arbiter of truth, and you're going to follow their idea of truth. So you better be okay with that if that's going to be your standard, because eventually someone else is going to be in office, and they're going to have their own arbiter of truth, and then we'll see how much you like it. And this is the danger of it. Now, liberals love the idea. Liberals are essentially fascists. This is what fascists do, right? Your typical liberal will not debate your typical conservative because their arguments are so weak. They're all based on emotion. They're all based on ad hominem attacks. And as soon as they start losing their argument, they go right to the racist card. They go right to the misogynist card. They go right to the white supremacy card, right? They go right to the ad hominem attacks because they can't make a logical argument. They cannot win an actual debate. So they rely on shutting down the opposition. So
we saw that exact playbook, and it's almost uncanny. I was going to use the video this morning to do it, but I just kind of went, nah, I don't want to do that. So there's a politician here in Australia that is on the yes side of the voice to Parliament, and he came out, and these were his words, and I'll quote for you. He says, "The voice to Parliament is not racist, but anybody that votes no to the voice to Parliament is racist."
Right.
And the reason I didn't use it is because I thought, oh, we've gone all the way to the bottom of the sewer and into name calling. The next thing that they're going to call us is a N-A-Z-I. I'm like, what the fucking These people, that guy hasn't read 1984. He's read the Communist Manifesto. He hasn't read 1984 or Animal Farm, and he hasn't read the Gulag Archipelago. He hasn't read Ordinary Men. But these are the people that are in charge of our country, and these are the fundamental things that are the most important to our society. But then if you don't like something that's there, you just call it racist. And I'm like, isn't it the other way round? I don't want to call you racist, but you're trying to implement race into the Constitution, the document that governs, says how the country works. You're trying to implement that into there, but you're calling me racist because I don't want something about race in the Constitution. The irony is just like, what the fuck's wrong with these people, man? These people are in charge.
Yeah, and look, depending on the person, some people are going to read 1984 as a cautionary tale, whereas another person is going to read it as a blueprint.
There you go. Karl Marx is the author of The Way the World Should Be. And then Alexander Solzhenitsyn is the person that says, well, Karl Marx wasn't quite right. Come and check it out. Come and read it. I challenge you to read the 3 volumes in the 1,500 pages of what communism is actually like. And most of those people will be like, Alexander who? Alexander what? They don't even know George what? Yeah, you're just saying something that the mainstream right-wing conspiracy theories are saying you're racist, white supremacist.
Look, I think freedom of speech, the concept of freedom of speech can be summed up very easily. And that the idea is the most vile speech must always be allowed. Anything short of promoting actual physical violence is good to go. You have to protect the most vile speech that is out there, the speech that you most disagree with. It's easy to believe in free speech when you agree with the speech. Okay, the real challenge is, are you willing to protect the speech that you do not believe in?
A little bit like that lady screaming and shouting, trying to burn the American flag, man, on the 4th of July of all things.
So I do not believe in hate speech laws at all. In England now, you can be put in jail for saying what they consider hateful things, right?
You can be put in jail for praying on the street, man.
Yeah. So
you've seen those videos going around as well. That's not a joke.
And America is holding on by its fingernails to the idea of free speech. It's under really severe attack by our own elected class, and our own deep state. So freedom is only as good as the next generation. Freedom has to be taught to every generation. It has to be retaught and recommitted to with every generation. And what I've seen here, that with every subsequent generation right now, it's not being taught to the children, and it's not being taught to be valued by our children. And so they think that things like this are okay, that it's okay to deem that the speech you disagree with as hate speech. It's okay. That is dangerous, because one day the other party is going to be in power and they're going to determine what hate speech is. So be careful what you advocate for.
Funny enough, they determined that speaking the truth is hate speech, and we've seen that in the last 3 years as well. And they believe that coercing you into a medical procedure is the way to run society. It's pretty terrible. All right, let's take a little break and we'll be right back.
Okay.
In this crazy, uncertain world, we all need a way to protect and insulate ourselves from the outside forces that we simply cannot control. I'm a news junkie, and after a lifetime of constantly immersing myself in the darkness and the despair that engulfs the world, the path to shield myself and my family has become crystal clear. I want to invite you to come and join me in the Unspoken Truth community, where I'll show you how I protect my family from this crazy world. You'll get access to 3 masterclasses worth over $1,000, as well as our live events, training, and community of truthers just like you. Come on over to the unspokentruth.com.au and join us for just 50 cents a day. What are you waiting for? Get started now at the unspokentruth.com.au. All right, I want to shift gears completely here. I've got a couple of little stories that I want to bring the show home with today. So far, so good. I've been completely wrong about the Zaporizhzhya Nuclear Power Plant. Thank goodness. I hope I continue to be wrong about this, although the scuttlebutt and the open source intelligence tells us that the attack on the power plant seems to be imminent. It seems to be either today or tomorrow, and it's still going to go ahead. So all open source intelligence is telling us that somebody, we don't know who, the Ukrainians are saying the Russians are going to blow up the power plant, and the Russians are saying the Ukrainians are going to blow up the power plant. But the IAEA, the boss, has come out and said, so his name is Rafael Grossi. So Raf has come out and said, no, we're all good. So let's take a look. He's in Japan, where he's at the Fukushima power plant, where they're about to release all of the water into the ocean. And I looked into that a little bit. It's actually a pretty common practice where nuclear power plants send that water back into the environment. And what they do is they distill it down to a point where it's acceptable to do that. And they've been doing that over the last couple of years. So it's all good to go, and everything's okay. It's an accepted practice, and we're all safe there in Japan and Fukushima, according to those people. But let's have a listen to what he says about what's happening at Zaporizhzhya.
We have a permanent presence. There is a permanent mission of the IAEA there. I have been in contact with them today, just a few hours ago. We are aware of these affirmations, these statements from both sides. You refer to President Zelensky's statements, but the Russian side has also come up with some of these things. What I say is what I said at the United Nations Security Council. A nuclear power plant should never, under any circumstances, be attacked. A nuclear power plant should not be used as a military base. The IAEA is there to observe, to monitor this, and to inform the world community if this happens. In our latest inspections, we haven't seen any mining activity, but we remain extremely alert. As you know, there is a counteroffensive ongoing. There is a lot of combat. I have been there a few weeks ago, and there is combat there, very close to the plant. So we cannot relax, and we will be informing and updating constantly.
So essentially he's saying, situation, no change. I told you that a couple of weeks ago. There was no mines in the plant. There was nothing that we saw that was there. Although we did see from the Ukrainian side that the Russians looked like they were putting something on the roof of some of these reactors. But we haven't seen any more intelligence since. So here's my problem with everything that the Ukrainians are saying. So as we talked about just the other day, they were saying that the Russians are going to blow this place. They've mined the cooling pond and they've parked trucks full of explosives on the inside of 4 of the reactors. And they've also put what looks like mines on the roof of 4 of the reactors. But here's my problem. I watched a video yesterday where there was a first-person drone, so somebody with a pair of goggles on flying the drone, trying to crash it into a Russian vehicle. And no joke, the thing must have flown about 10 kilometers. It went for miles. And I'm like, where's this video? And I'm fast forwarding the video, right? And the thing, the slider on the screen is this big, and like this is going for like 7 or 8 minutes. This drone's like flying forever. And so the surveillance drone has found where it is, and the FPV drone with the round on it is going there to blow it up. So if we can fly like 7 or 8 kilometers with these FPV drones, and I know the drone in the bag on the ground there behind me, that thing has a range of about 10 kilometers. You know, if you send it out 10 kilometers, are you going to get it back? Well, maybe the battery will die, right? You've got to be careful of that. So you've got to watch that. But I know the thing can fly a long way. And when I look at how far the river is, the Dnipro River, from the right side of the bank to the left side of the bank, as they call it, so the north and south bank, you could fly a drone across there pretty easily. And I can tell you from the Mavic 3 in the bag behind me, I can tell you that it's got a 28 times zoom on it. And I can see a long, long, long way with that. So I could fly conceivably halfway, maybe 3/4 of the way across the river with my pissant Mavic 3 drone for $5,000 in the bag there, use its incredible optics to see what's on the roof. So the Ukrainians are continuing to say that they've put things on the roof of the power plant. Okay, show me. I just don't believe you. I don't believe you. I just don't believe you. Because you've got Storm Shadow missiles, you've got stealth missiles that you've managed to retrofit to 1980s Russian bombers, and you're telling me that you can't show me a photo of what you think is a mine on the top of a nuclear reactor? I don't believe you. They're so full of shit, man, these Ukrainians. It's just bullshit. All of it is bullshit. And this guy, Rafael, is saying, no, it's bullshit. He's calling them out. There's nothing there. We have people there. We're looking every day. We're observing. We're being careful. This guy is completely impartial, saying that there's nothing there. We're aware of the Russian narrative. We're aware of the Ukrainian narrative, but there is nothing there. So everything the Ukrainians are saying is bullshit. And the Russian propaganda machine has to react to what the Ukrainians are saying. So fair enough. I kind of see that side of it. But this guy has just called out Zelensky. He's called him out and said, what are you talking about? There's nothing there, man. I was there just a couple of weeks ago, and they've got people there right now. There's nothing there. There's no mines on the roof. There's no trucks full of explosives. When they first went there, you might remember that there was people that were filming in there that had their mobile phone. They're like, really quickly, you get 3 or 4 seconds of footage, and there was Russian trucks parked on the inside of these buildings, and they just looked like logistics trucks. Well, they could be full of explosives or whatever, but that was like months ago when they first took over the power plant. But the reality is, everything that Zelensky has been saying for the last week is bullshit. So if something does happen in the next 48 hours, it's going to be as a result of the Ukrainians. And I'm calling it. I'm calling it. There's no reason for the Russians to blow it up. No. This guy's confirmed that there's nothing there, and he's called out the bullshit from the Ukrainian side. And if something happens, who is it going to be from? Not from the Russians. No way.
I'll tell you who I think. Listen, if that guy gets blown up, I'm not going to be looking at Russia, and I'm not going to be looking. And my first subject will not be Ukraine. My first suspect is going to be the CIA.
They're talking about not actually even blowing up the plant, right? So the open source intelligence is saying that what the Ukrainians have got is nuclear waste material from another plant, and they're going to fire a dirty bomb at it so they don't have to blow up the plant. But what's going to happen is we've got the nuclear radiation sniffer planes out there that go, well, what's that? That looks like a radiation leak. And so what they're going to do is they're going to launch a dirty bomb at it. And it makes sense when you think about it, right? Why would the Ukrainians want to create a disaster, like nuclear disaster like that? So how would you contain that disaster? Well, one way you could do that is by blowing up the cooling pond, letting the rods be exposed, and then all the radiation comes out. That's one way of doing it. Or if you did fire a dirty bomb at it, and you could conceivably do that with an artillery round from the other side of the river pretty easily, yeah, you would create that radiation leak. Oh, it's not, that's just pretty, it's localized, man. It's only small, it's only in this area. But Raf there is saying, no, there's nothing there. He's called it out. So if something happens, there's one of two things that are going on. The Ukrainians either actually have blown it up or they've launched some sort of dirty bomb type scenario to happen. It's crazy, man. I can't believe this is happening.
Well, you're right not to believe Zelensky. Why the hell would anybody believe this guy? He's been lying nonstop since he's been in office, and it's a very correct. And he wants. If he did this, it's the money play, right? He's looking for money. He's looking for money. He's going to pay the victim card, and where this is an existential threat. See, if they can do this to us, they can do this to you. So it's better off. So you're better off putting your money here in Ukraine, so we can stop them here. It's a money grab, right?
We're fighting them for you, so you don't have to fight them on your land.
That's right.
But again,
it's a very simple solution, right? Just bring in the United Nations peacekeeping force to take over control of the plant.
That would solve it, and they could mobilize that in a heartbeat. Get a bunch of like Indian and Pakistani soldiers in there that are completely neutral to the whole thing. The Indians are neutral. Get them in there. Bring the Chinese soldiers in there, for heaven's sake. Bring the Chinese and the Indians in there. They're both part of the UN. They would both be neutral like that because the Chinese said that they don't want to get involved militarily. Then that would stop them from being involved because they're in a neutral stance there. And then the Indians in there, they said they want to be neutral. The South Africans also said they want to be neutral. Bring in those people from the UN to guard the plant. There could be 100 soldiers. There'd be a company of soldiers there on watch and rotate a battalion of soldiers through there. You'd have 3 or 4 companies there. That'd be enough. It's not that big a place.
Mission accomplished. Problem solved. So why don't they? If you and I can think of this, why don't they?
I know. And I'm about as far from a diplomat as you could get.
Yeah.
I just want to blow stuff up.
Yeah, but you're a problem solver. So there it is. How you solve the problem. It's not difficult, and it's not unprecedented.
Yes.
The United Nations, they brag about their peacekeeping operations.
I was a UN peacekeeper twice, 2 times.
Okay.
In the Navy and in the Army.
Wow. So there you go. So
there it is.
It's not unprecedented. This is come on, guys. So it just shows me that there's an agenda here. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, this is not a war between Ukraine and Russia. This is a proxy war between America and Russia. And the people who started this war and perpetuated this war are doing it for the money. This is a money grab. So this is largely a Black Rock war.
Absolutely. All right, let's shift gears because I want to share another video. The chaos in France seems to have fallen off the 24-hour news cycle, but the destruction continues. And I just want to get your take on this. This is one of the most famous places in the world. It's the Alcazar Library in Marseille. And it looks like these I'm just going to have to turn the sound down on this because it's just crazy loud. But the protesters have destroyed this place. And the destruction of that. So think of the most historic library in your city or your town that has documents that are literally hundreds of years old. And this looks like a large building, right? And they said that there's millions and millions of documents in there that have been completely and totally destroyed. And when I look at something like that, it breaks my heart a little bit, but at the same time, I wonder if the legacy institutions like that are even relevant in today's modern digital world.
I look at this and I think about the burning of the Library of Alexandria. You're
all that history's gone, right?
Yeah, when you attack libraries, you're attacking a culture. You're trying to wipe out a culture, a history. Now these days, we have digital and whatever, but the symbolism is still the same. And if you're a Frenchman, you have any sense of nationhood, of pride in your country, this should set you over the edge. It doesn't make me sad. It makes me angry as hell. As an American, that's equivalent to lighting on fire our Library of Congress. Right? The depository. Look at zero tolerance. These people should be bowing to Mecca and thanking God that Ed Anderson isn't the president of France.
Well, there's been a couple of times there in the past couple of years the riots got out of control, and the French military have said either fix it or we're going to come here and fix it for you. Marie Le Pen, the opposition leader there, she's denoted as the far right opposition leader. Not far right. She just has like ideas that are different to government and that are actually in many ways better than the government. She's been somebody who's calling for the end of the war in Ukraine for a long time. She's been calling for negotiations with Putin for a long time. And she's now out there as a public figure because she's the opposition leader saying, I'll save you. I'll stop it. Want me to stop it for you? I'll stop it for you. Because he doesn't seem to care about it. And, it just kind of shows... In some ways, I don't want to say it's deliberate because it's a bit of a tinfoil hat conspiracy theory to say that that's deliberate, because who would willfully allow the destruction of such a historical site and such an important thing? Like, it's just like, who would do that? Who would allow a museum to be burnt down? No one in their right mind. The same way as the Russians are not going to blow up a nuclear power plant. No one in their right mind is going to do that. No one allows a museum or a library with all of that history to be burnt down. But if the government continues, work with me here, if the government continues to allow this destruction to occur and they allow that to happen and they don't adjust their strategies and they don't adjust their tactics, it gives them more opportunity to take away more rights to the people there to say, look, listen, if you want to go out, you better have your phone in your pocket because we're going to track you everywhere you go. So there was legislation that was introduced into the European Parliament just in the last 48 hours, I think it was. And what they were saying is, what we want to do is we want to stop child sex trafficking. We all know now that this is a big thing. It's been in the media a lot in the last couple of weeks because of Tim Ballard and the new movie that's come out in the last couple of days. And we want to stop that. But what it will do is it will give carte blanche to the authorities to search every single app on your phone. So would you allow that to happen?
No.
To stop child sex trafficking? No, of course you wouldn't, right? That doesn't affect me. What do I care? Mind your own business. Get out of my phone type thing. But what I'm suggesting is that the legislations are in place to allow these things to actually happen. And the government could be allowing the destruction of these historical sites to create outrage in the community to say, we told you. And the government goes, well, now that happened, to prevent that from happening again, here's how we're going to stop it. And they just take away all of your freedom as a result of it. By the way, we're going to put this thing on everybody's phone. It's going to stop child sex trafficking, but also we'll be able to track you wherever you are. So if somebody gets an idea that they think they can go and kick in the front window of a shop and go and loot it or throw a Molotov cocktail, we know exactly who that person is because we can see the GPS position of you. We know where you are. We've got facial recognition. We can do all these things. So we know exactly how to find you. And there'll be a percentage of society that goes, oh, finally, we're going to stop the chaos. And now let's do it. I'm not doing anything wrong. Let's allow it. Like, it's a very slippery slope. I'm not saying that the destruction of that library was allowed by the government, but I'm saying that the destruction of the library was allowed by the government.
I can see that. I don't think that's much of a stretch. No, I can certainly see that because that is the government's playbook. They use emergencies, they use tragedy, they use catastrophe. They use emergencies to promote their evil agendas.
How about this philosophy, Ed? I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and the guy, he was the commanding officer of the Theodore Roosevelt aircraft carrier. I think it was. Don't quote me here. I can't remember exactly. It was during COVID, and he wasn't getting the help that he needed. You might remember this story. He wasn't getting the help that he needed, and so he sent an unclassified email up the chain of command saying, "Oh, you're not helping me. All of this is happening." And there was a media story saying, "Well, the aircraft carrier, all of these people have COVID. Is that now an effective fighting force? Has it been destroyed by this?" So there's a big media story about that, and he was relieved of his command. So the podcast was him and his mate chatting about their careers as pilots. He was a helicopter pilot, then an F-18 pilot, then he went to be a nuclear engineer, and then he became a captain of the Blue Ridge, and then the captain of this aircraft carrier. And the conversation was centered around, when he was talking about being a captain, like, what does the captain actually do? And he said one of the most difficult things in leadership is you have to learn to delegate, because there's 5,000 people on this warship. I have to learn to delegate everything to it. I have to trust my staff. I have to have a culture where they trust me and I trust them. And when things go wrong, we discipline people in private and then we praise them in public and all of these things. It was actually a really good lesson on leadership. But one of the biggest things that I took away from it that I'd never heard before, and it got me thinking about all this conspiracy theory stuff that you and I talk about all the time, and the government, how we talk about. His job as the captain of the aircraft carrier was to look up and out 2 or 3 years ahead of where he was. And I thought to myself, I thought he was responsible for the day-to-day activities of the carrier. And in some ways he was. In many ways that was his direct responsibility to his sailors and the people that were under his command. But he was also responsible to look 2 or 3 years ahead into the future with the carrier, because it's a $12 billion asset. It's going to all these different places and it requires all this logistics and on. You can imagine what is going on with something like that. So if you think of like a government instrument like an aircraft carrier like that, it makes sense that you have those sorts of people in charge. Think of just the government itself in general. There's people that sit around in government departments as part of think tanks that actually think these things through. So somebody in the Australian government came up with the idea that we should have the message from the heart, from Uluru or whatever, which turned into the voice to Parliament. So somebody has gone, that's been in the works for like 20 years. We've tried to, and now we're going to have a treaty, and now we're going to have reparations, and we're going to have all of, and here's how we're going to take over the Australian government. So people have been sitting around thinking about this for a long time. And I also think that all of this migration crisis that we've seen in Europe is 100% deliberate. The deliberate destabilization of the Middle East and those countries creates a huge, giant migration crisis, which destabilizes Europe, which allows the WEF to go, well, maybe we should just have one world government. It would be easier if we all came in and did the same things together, wouldn't it? And I look at what's happening in French society, and if you kind of zoom into the map, what's happening right now in France is like you zoomed all the way in at this library. But if you step out to those steps and you take like 100,000 foot view, you're almost in space looking down at this view. You go, no, that's just like part of the plan. That whole thing is just part of the plan that was already deliberately designed. And there's people that have been sitting around, like that guy that drives the aircraft carrier, that have been sitting around thinking today 4 or 5 years ahead. They're thinking not 2 or 3 orders of magnitude ahead. They're thinking 50 years ahead of what's actually going on. And they're implementing that plan and allowing that to play out now.
Well, sure. Just look at the plans that the WEF have been working on. They've been working on these CBDCs, these 50-minute cities, climate change nonsense for a generation now. So here we are. So and they've gotten their acolytes in all the right high-level positions of governments around the world. Not just the presidents and vice presidents of the countries, but their Secretary of Labor and Secretary of the Treasury and deep state people that will be there for a long time. So they've got, in that sense, you got to give them credit, man. They've been working diligently on their evil plans now for decades, and now here we are. And
when something like this happens, it just accelerates their plans, like the burning of a library. When something like that happens, it just that plays perfectly into our hands. How can we spin this? How do we not waste this opportunity to advance our agenda, to advance whatever it is that they're trying to do? And it seems to be working, man.
Well, yeah. I mean, look, you and I have talked before about how, in my opinion, there has to be a World War III.
Yeah, for them, absolutely.
That's right.
I think it might start today, actually.
With
the power plant.
So, we've been in an economic World War III now for a couple of years.
For a while, yeah.
Right? But whether or not the World War III means an actual shooting war or just a World War III type event. Where all
the same things happen without the shooting.
Yeah, maybe the dollar collapses overnight, or maybe the stock market collapses overnight, or something happens. Because there are plenty of financial landmines laying all over the place, any one of which can blow up our monetary system overnight.
Yeah, so far worse than an actual kinetic war where only soldiers are dying. Yeah, it affects everybody. Yeah. All right, let's shift gears. I need your help. I need to borrow your American brain because We've got this woman, her name is Linda Burney. She's the Minister for Indigenous Affairs here in Australia. She's the proponent and one of the architects of the Voice to Parliament. I won't bore you with the detail of her National Press Club address yesterday because I watched it and I'm just scratching my head going, this woman can't even make a way through a speech without stumbling across her words 10 or 15 times. And I just don't understand how these people get into positions of authority. And look, it could be she, behind the scenes, she's a really good manager. She knows what she's talking about. She's completely connected to what she's doing. I don't know. I'll give the lady the benefit of the doubt. She's in that position on merit is what I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt on. But I could be completely wrong. It could be all virtue signaling. What I don't understand is how they allow her to go to a National Press Club address, which is the premier place in Australia for the media. All of Australia's media are in this place, eating lunch, listening to this woman rabbit on, taking notes, and every single person in that room is going to go away and write like a 10,000 word article, create 50 tweets out of it, and send all sorts of content out into the internet through the organisations that they work for, whether that's mainstream organisations or they're just small little bloggers. It doesn't matter. The point is, she's got this audience and she's got the ability to put her case forward and completely bombs it. But then she talks about Trump-style politics. Let me play the video and get your take because I have absolutely no idea what she's talking about.
Being run by a group called Fair Australia. It is importing Trump-style politics to Australia. It is post-truth. And its aim is to polarise. Its aim is to sow division in our society by making false claims, including that providing advice to government would somehow impact the fundamental democratic principle of one vote, one value. A claim designed to mislead.
Okay.
What does Trump-style politics mean? So let me just back up a second before I ask the question. There's a large percentage of Australians are like, what the fuck is the Voice to Parliament? What is this? So they're listening to this lady going, okay, cool. Now I see what she's doing. I've never heard it before. Okay, now I see what she's doing. Cool. And then she says Trump-style politics. 99.9% of Australians don't follow Australian politics. And 99.99999% of Australians don't follow American politics. They don't give a shit. They know who Donald Trump is. And they know that Donald Trump is a divisive figure or whatever, and he did good or bad or, something to do with Russia. Most people do not follow politics. And she's talking in an audience of media that can share her message, to share her side of the story, to say why we should all vote yes, why we should all do this. And then she's talking about American politics. And I've been following politics in Australia for my entire adult life. And American politics, particularly geopolitics, because I was in the military and figuring out where we're going to go next, for all of my adult life as well, because I was in the military when I was 17. And I look at all of that and I think, I don't understand what she's talking about. So can you please explain to me as an American what Trump-style politics means?
Sure, happy to. Okay, first of all, she looks really, really familiar. And what I'm wondering is, has anyone ever seen her and Nancy Pelosi in the same room at the same time?
Yeah, now that you say that, that's a real good comparison, actually. How did the Aboriginal lady that works in Parliament for 30 years of her life become a multi-millionaire?
Yeah.
Because that's her. Like, how did she get so wealthy, man? She only gets paid like $200,000 a year. How did she get so wealthy?
Well, at the very least, I'm sure she's on the mailing list of the Democratic wish list. Yeah. She's getting because this is the exact message that we've been getting from Michelle Obama and Hillary Clinton, that if Trump were to win the next election, that will be the end of democracy. That is going to be their mantra in the next election.
Hold on a sec. She says, we're trying to import, the No campaign is trying to import Trump-style policies and Trump-style strategies and tactics. But what does that mean? Like,
it's whatever she says it is. And what she is saying is it's misinformation and disinformation and lying. So it's the liar, pants on fire argument. Whatever he says, he's lying to you. That's the extent of their arguments. That's their pushback. And this is what liberals do. When they can't counter an argument, when they cannot make their own coherent, positive argument about the point of view, they discredit the other side. And the way they do it is everything he says is a lie. Everything he says is misinformation, disinformation. So that's it. Everything is about the other side is misinformation, disinformation. Yeah, but what about, doesn't matter, misinformation, disinformation. She's not interested in giving you an argument supporting her side. She's trying to degrade her side. So for the left, that's what they're painting. So when they say it's Trump kind of politics, it's code. It's shorthand for he's lying. He's lying. And if they say that often enough, they hope that people believe it. And that is
so let me give you an example, and maybe what I'm about to do is Trump style politics, because I'm trying to figure it out, right? Because I'm genuinely confused by her statement, and I'm trying to be swayed. I'm trying to allow the yes side of the let me listen, man. Maybe there's something to it. I think it's stupid what they're doing, but maybe you could sway me to your side. Maybe there's something that I don't know. So she came out yesterday and said that if it gets up, there's 4 things as the minister that I'll direct the Voice to Parliament to do. The first one is to look at jobs, housing, health, and there was one other thing that she said that was like pretty sensible, right? So jobs, housing, health, and something to do with family or something like that. I can't remember exactly. And the reality is, if it's written into the Constitution, the Voice to Parliament there's a constitutional lawyer that said they can talk about anything from parking tickets to submarines. And because it's the Constitution. And the idea is that the Voice to Parliament can talk about anything that affects Aboriginals and anything that affects Indigenous population. We can talk about it and we can have a say about that. And the constitutional lawyer said, yeah, you can do all of that, but the problem is you're going to get stuck in the High Court when they make recommendations about something the government does and they don't like it and they want to recommend something else. That then has to go to the High Court to make a decision about whether it should be or shouldn't be. And it doesn't make any sense because she's come. So here's where this Linda Burney lady would say that I'm promoting mis and disinformation. Because she's come out and said, here's the 4 things that I would direct them to concentrate on and to talk about. But the constitutional lawyer says, well, yeah, you could direct them to talk about those 4 things, but they could also talk about parking tickets or submarines or defense policy if they wanted to as well. So, but she would say that that's incorrect. That's misinformation. I'm not telling them to talk about defense policy. I'm telling them to talk about housing and health and family and schools. Schools was the other thing that she wanted to talk about, education. So is that Trump-style politics when you say one thing, but then I say the other, and then you say what I'm saying is disinformation? Is that what it is?
So she, in her mind, her argument is anybody who disagrees with what I'm saying is a liar and spreading misinformation. And doesn't matter.
So I'm disagreeing with what she's saying, but I'm not disagreeing that you're going to direct them to talk about those 4 things because you're saying that. So, okay, cool. You're gonna tell them to do those 4 things. But I've got a constitutional lawyer over here, somebody that knows how this actually works and helps write these documents. He knows how it works. And he says that it could also be about defense policy and it could also be about anything that the Voice decides.
Misinformation. That's misinformation.
So is that Trump-style politics, what I'm doing now? Saying that this guy is saying that this is, you're not saying that.
That is not, Trump-style politics is the exact opposite of that. Trump is fighting against that, but that's not the way they're painting it. Okay, so this is about painting your opposition in a certain light. It's about, it's propaganda, right? It's about, Trump is what I'd call a truther. Trump is pushing back. Again, Trump is the antithesis of everything the left stands for. So, but since they don't have an argument, they've got to paint him as a guy promoting disinformation. So essentially, from the point of view on the left, anybody who disagrees with what I'm saying is promoting disinformation.
Right.
And they're painting that, and they have to have a bad guy, right? They have to have a poster boy. Trump is a convenient poster boy because everybody knows Trump, right? And Trump is a controversial figure. So he's the poster boy. He's going to be the poster boy of misinformation, right? He's going to be equated to the anti-vaxxers and to the truthers.
What about this? And tell me if this is Trump-style politics as well. So Linda Burney is an Indigenous woman. She's the Minister for Indigenous Affairs. Okay, cool. You made it to that point, and the Australian population have said that that's what we want, and you're there. We have the Shadow Minister for Indigenous Affairs, Jacinta Price, and she's also an Aboriginal woman. And we have Linda Burney. When I say this out loud, man, it sounds so fucking stupid, man. I can't believe I'm saying it. Linda Burney comes out in a speech to the National Press Club saying that we went and asked all Aboriginals if they want that, and all Aboriginals said yes, they do. But on the other side of politics, man, just you sit in the same chamber as this woman, the Shadow Indigenous Affairs Minister, is a woman of Aboriginal descent and is saying no. But you're saying to the Australian population that you went and asked all Aboriginals and all Aboriginals said yes, that they want this. But the Shadow Minister is an Aboriginal and she's saying no. So what you're saying is not true. It's a lie. You didn't ask all Australian Aboriginals. You only asked a few of them, and probably the ones that you're funding, because the one that you're not funding, the one that's not on your side, is saying no. So you're lying to the Australian population about the voice to Parliament by saying that you consulted all Aboriginals and you're saying that they all want it. But there's one on the other side of politics that says, no, we don't want it. And I'm just like going, how dumb do you have? Are you really in charge? Are you really? You are. I think you really are in charge. This shows us that when somebody is not behind, there's no puppeteer pulling the strings of Linda Burney behind her, and you let these people stand on their own merits, they are absolute foolish morons. I can't think of another way to describe her statement of, we went and asked all Aboriginals and all Aboriginals want a voice to Parliament. But there's an Aboriginal that's leading the no campaign saying, no, we don't want it. It doesn't make any sense. And the Australian public just go, oh, she must have asked. But you're lying. It's a bold-faced lie.
Okay.
My fucking head, man.
Listen, I think
I watch it and go, but in like 1 second, I can hear what she's saying. And she thinks that Australians are so stupid they don't realise what she's saying. But I think she just sunk it herself. She sunk the yes vote herself. It's a self-inflicted wound. She hit the self-destruct button, man, and torpedoed her entire campaign in that one statement. We asked all Aboriginals and all Aboriginals said that they wanted it. Well, you didn't ask like Jacinta, because Jacinta didn't want it.
Well, she didn't expect anybody to ask a follow-up question.
She didn't think that Jacinta would end up on the other side. So why are you doing that? Come on our side.
Well, for liberal politicians who are supported by a liberal press, many times they're not asked that follow-up question. So maybe she was assuming that her buddies would give her cover.
Listen, man, I've done some stupid shit in my life, yeah. I've ridden around on my motorbike here at 300 kilometers an hour when I was like in my 20s, like a fucking dickhead in the national park. I make one mistake, I'm dead, and I'll probably kill 20 people in the process as well at that speed. I've flown around in airplanes with other people doing the wrong things, what I shouldn't be doing, below the altitudes I'm supposed to be, and all sorts of shit that I've done dangerous shit skydiving, I've done dangerous stuff as a soldier, I've done dangerous, stupid things, man. I've nearly been killed a dozen times. I've done some stupid shit in my life. But I've never made a public statement like that, where I've consulted all Aboriginals and they've said that they wanted to vote yes, and they want an Indigenous voice to Parliament, while there's somebody that saying that they're Aboriginal and they're saying no. That is like, by far, that might be the dumbest thing that has ever been said in Australian politics. In Australian political history, in the 200 and something years that we've existed as a country, that potentially is the stupidest thing that's ever been said. And I just can't believe it.
Well, the thing is, though, it doesn't matter. I mean, when you think of all the stupid things that politicians say on a regular basis, things that you know they've got to know it's a lie. We had Adam Schiff for years saying that he had, right?
That guy is funny as hell, man, when I see that dude. All the memes of him.
Yeah, and for years, he guaranteed that he had actual physical evidence, showing Trump-Russia collusion.
She had physical evidence that they asked all Aboriginals.
Look, I can't show it to you yet, but I have it. I can't, and it was went on for like 3 years, right?
It's in the same drawer as the medical advice.
Right. So these politicians, they say things that they know are lies, and they're never called on it. There's never any accountability.
I don't think she knows. I don't know. That's what I'm saying. I don't think she realizes how stupid her statement is. I don't think she realizes.
Yeah, well, my guess is she's doing the calculus, right? She's got something to promote, and she's going to say whatever sounds good to promote that topic, and she doesn't worry about the consequences of it because she doesn't expect there to be consequences. Because
I feel more like when you kind of know how government works and department works. How often does a minister actually write their own speech? Every now and then they would. They would probably write the speech and hand it off to the speechwriter, and the speechwriter would tidy it up. They get it back and they go back and forth until they got it. I feel like she was like, "I'm good, yeah, I'm good. I got it. I got this." And she writes her own speech, and she fucked it up so badly, man, that she looks like the dumbest politician in Australian history ever. By making a broad sweeping statement by saying all Aboriginals want this, but the leader of the person that doesn't want it isn't Aboriginal. So
again, I don't think she ever expected pushback or the follow-up question or anybody to do any fact checking.
I didn't fact check it. I'm just telling you that Jacinta's Aboriginal, man. But you said all Aboriginals want it, but she's
yeah, but details. The point, but she'll say. This is a detail. I was trying to make a point. I was using a little hyperbole to make a point. Whatever.
Try and wriggle out of it, you reckon?
That's right. They'll wiggle out. Or she'll say she had a God Save the Queen moment.
I haven't laughed over Australian politics like hard for a long time, but I was laughing hard by myself at 5 o'clock in the morning as I'm reading Twitter going, I'm the fucking stupidest person on planet Earth, man. I can't believe it.
In a democracy, especially in a big country like America, you would hope that you get the best and smartest running for office, right? But we don't. We get the exact opposite. The best and brightest people, they don't want to have anything to do with the sewer.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I remember somebody asked Jocko Willink one time on not on his podcast. He was being interviewed by somebody else. They said, "Why don't you run for politics, man? You'd be hugely popular." And he's like, "Man, that looks like the most miserable life you could ever possibly imagine. Imagine like the horse trading and the bullshit you'd have to deal with on a day-to-day." He goes, "Man, I love my life. I get up in the morning, I go to the gym, I train jiu-jitsu, I do these podcasts, I go and work with incredible company, I help build businesses. My businesses are thriving. Why on earth would I ever want to enter politics? Why would I ever do that?"
And he would have far more influence doing what he's doing.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's why Jordan Peterson says he won't enter politics as well, because he has more influence as just as a personality than he does as politics. All right, let's shift gears to the last story of the day. I wanted to show you a video that I came across once again in Twitter, and it shows a Chinese shopping center. And the caption to the Chinese shopping center in the video that I saw, so this is a place in Shenzhen in China.
Cool.
So the caption that when I saw the video was, "Look at these Chinese happy, well-adjusted, in good health Chinese people look in their shopping center." And the comparison was to San Francisco. And imagine if you went out the front of the shopping center here in Shenzhen in China, there wouldn't be people taking a dump in the streets or taking fentanyl and trank in the streets or sleeping in tents or anything like that. And it just really kind of reminded me that society can function pretty well as a whole, and I'm not some CCP bro or some CCP wannabe, but these people, I would suggest to you that 90% of them, because only 10% of the Chinese population are card-carrying communists. So 90% of these people don't give a shit about communism, and they don't give a shit about the CCP or anything. What they want is just a better life for themselves. And the Chinese know how to build things at scale, right? Whether it's good quality or not, doesn't matter. They build this really big, giant shopping center. It looks nice. Families are having a good time. And when you contrast this against what you see in, a lot of American society, and what I see, what I'm exposed to, this looks like the polar opposite, man. This looks like something that's really nice and pleasant and kind of enjoyable. And I think, yeah, it's nice. And when I look at it, when I watch this video, I thought to myself, yeah, I can see what you're trying to do by highlighting and you're juxtaposing this against San Francisco or some chaotic place in LA. I'm sure that they have those places in China too. But as a whole, their society here in China looks like it functions incredibly well. Everybody looks middle class. There's nobody running around with a gun shooting anybody in a public scenario. You never hear about mass shootings in China. And everybody looks, pretty healthy as well. Just saying. But I don't know, man. What do you think when you see this? Because I saw this video and I thought, yeah, I can see the comparison you're trying to make with American society. And I look at that and I think that looks a lot like the shopping center where I live. I don't know. I could be completely wrong. Maybe in America it does look like that, and maybe it is, just to beat up what I'm seeing in the media.
Well, look at the footage, and I see the benefits of mind control.
Yeah, buddy, come Xi Jinping. I'm going to channel you into me. Maybe it's not such a bad thing after all, right?
Well, no. Listen, I lived in Japan for quite a while, and
looks just like that.
There you go. Japan is meticulous. Right?
Beautiful.
Even now, I don't care what YouTube video, do a YouTube search randomly on anything related to Japanese, and everyone's is like off the charts polite. Everyone, there's no fights breaking out in the street. Women can walk home in the middle of the night, not fearing anything. Their safety. You don't see homeless encampments. Now the downside of that is try to be an illegal immigrant in Japan. Okay, yeah, good luck with that.
Out you go.
Yeah. So they have rules they have official rules that are very strictly enforced. But more importantly, they have a culture, right? Now, Japan is an ancient civilization, and so is China, right? And so they have a way of. They have expectations in society. You're expected to treat your elders a certain way. You're expected to treat children a certain way. If you want to watch something really, really cute, do a YouTube search for Japanese children sent out of the house on their own at like 4 and 5 years old. They send them to like the grocery store, and really cute videos of like the little girl going to the grocery store on her own for the first time. and the cameras are hidden, but they're watching her, and she's navigating. She's going to the grocery store, and she's going to the recycling bin. And you have children in kindergarten and first grade being sent to school by themselves. You see them getting onto subways, getting onto trains, and finding their ways to school on their own. And you know what? You will see strangers looking out for the kids. Making sure they're okay. So that's a society that they have. So it's like a societal contract where everyone feels responsible for their neighbor. But so it really is a cultural kind of a thing, and that can't be taught or sold in a generation. That's kind of like built into your roots, your heritage, and it's a set of expectations that's put on you by your society.
So when you watch this video, are you seeing something similar in society when you see this? Is that reflective of what you remember in living in Japan, seeing happy people with families and they're out doing their thing just on a Wednesday evening or something?
Yeah, I mean, the idea that someone would be ripping through that crowd, yelling obscenities, it's unimaginable, right? It's that person would probably be considered, insane.
So when you go to your mall in Minnesota, where you live in St. Paul there, and does it look like that? Is it calm and nice and pleasant and friendly? Is it? Yeah.
Well, we have Minnesota Nice here. Yeah, that's like a Minnesota mall. Yep.
Yeah. So same, right? So I think this. But what about in San Francisco? We're not saying the same thing.
No, San Francisco. Oh man. That poor, you people, what the hell? One of the most beautiful cities in the world, and look, now it's a national embarrassment, and that's brought to you by the liberals of your state, the liberals, And I'll argue with anybody on the topic. Oh, no, yes, you did. You created policies that destroyed your state. That's why anyone who can afford to leave is leaving.
Has left, or is in the process of leaving. It's a crazy society, isn't it? For sure. It's nice to get the juxtaposition and get your views on that as well.
I do have an announcement to make for tomorrow's show for everyone out there. So I want everyone to know, please tune in tomorrow for a very special Unspoken Truth episode, because we are going to have 2 segments where Rob and I are going to list our top 5 celebrity crushes and our top 5 guilty pleasures.
Oh, you're going to commit? You're committing me to it. I've got to commit to the actual. Ed's been hassling me for ages, folks, to try and do this, but I'm so boring. I can't think of top 5 celebrity crushes or top 5
guilty pleasures. Yeah.
But I'm going to do it today. I promise you.
Boy Scout. I figured I had to do it live, make them not to kind of shame you.
Now I'm committed.
I've had mine, for
weeks. All right, I'll sort that out. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on the Unspoken Truth today. If you watch live, thank you for your support. If you're listening to this as a podcast, we really appreciate that. And if you haven't discovered it as a podcast, make sure you head on over to Spotify or to Apple Podcasts and grab your copy, and make sure you subscribe over there as well. Don't forget, we're on Twitter. Ed's on Twitter as well. I'll put the link in the description there for you. It's just Hey Ed Official. You can connect with him there as well. And make sure you come on over to the Telegram channel. All of the links are down below in the description. That pretty much wraps it up for today. What do we say? How do we end this show, Ed? We always use it. Joe Biden quote to do that.
God save the Queen.
No, the one is like Putin is doing really not very well in Iraq. But God save the Queen anyway.
What? Oh, yeah.
You don't remember that one, Putin?
We have a new Indian line?
That was the new one. He's like, Vladimir Putin's not doing very well in the war in Iraq. It's like, what was he doing in Iraq, man? I thought he was in Ukraine. God save the Queen, everyone. See you tomorrow. Bye for now.